bonus question, how many Sundays are there in Lent? Pretty close. 6. And then you have Easter, right? Yeah. But we're just going to do 5 because that's all the sermons I got, right? So, amen. So the choir is going to take the 6th one is what's going to end up happening. But this is the first Sunday of the Lenten season. So Lent, in case you didn't know, is kind of a journey we take, you know, kind of like what children do, that you kind of start there at the bottom at Ash Wednesday and you make your way all the way around until you finally end up at Easter, the celebration of Easter. And so it's a journey that we take that started last Wednesday. Everybody here for Ash Wednesday service? Anybody get an opportunity to do that? It's kind of when we set things up for what we're going to be doing during this Lenten season. So if you missed it, then you got to go back. No, you don't. But you'll catch on pretty quickly. But it's kind of a way that we prepare our minds for Easter, right? Because Easter is kind of a big deal. It's even bigger than Mother's Day. Don't let that get out, all right? But it is a big deal. And what we do on Easter is that during the Lenten season is prepare ourselves for that. We're going to do it 2 ways. And the Lenten season is number 1, really, because the Lenten season really talks a lot about humanity's participation in the death of Jesus, right? So we got to deal with all our garbage is what we do during the Lenten season. Because everybody in that story had some responsibility within the story of Jesus' death. Whether it was actively involved in denying or killing or turning them in. There were things that were going very actively. Then you have the passive people who just kind of watched and did nothing. Put their hands in their pockets, maybe looked the other way, didn't want to say anything, and were quiet about it. But everyone had a participation in the death of Jesus. And so we can say that for the first time in the history of our world, that the created killed the creator. Let that sink in for a minute. The God who created was killed by the created. All right? First time it's ever happened. And so we have to deal with this stuff. Even though we weren't there a couple thousand years ago, we still have the DNA. We still have those tendencies that cause us to kind of separate ourselves from God by doing who knows what and everything about it. But also we separate ourselves from one another, which is the same thing, really. You can't love, if you don't love your brother or your sister, then you can't love God. And so we separate ourselves. And so we've got to deal with all of our garbage during this Lenten season so we can deal with this number 2. And that's to figure out how is God going to respond to the created murdering the creator. What would you do? What would you do? Someone stole your favorite toy. What would you do? Well, we know kind of what we would do because we have that DNA in us. But what did God do? God chose to love. And it's kind of an overwhelming effect if we deal with all of our garbage first and then reach the end of the rainbow and just feel this and say, golly, look what I've done. Look at what I do. Look at who I am. What's God's response is say, let's go do it again. Let's pick yourself up, brush you off. Let's love on you. And then to be overwhelmed with, why would you react and respond that way? Sometimes we go through all this Easter stuff so many times, we really don't understand or really feel the impact of Easter because we really don't understand the humbling perspective of what we must go through to see the things that we have done or things that we continue to do and the things that we probably will do down the road that really separate ourselves from God or being the people that God knows we can be. That's different, isn't it? And the purpose of Lent is not to say, boy, Melinda, aren't you shameful? Now, if you just gave an extra money in the plate, we'll overlook that stuff, right? It's not about that. It's about really trying to understand the magnitude of what we tend to do when we get away from who God intended us to be. Because God has some amazing things to do with every one of us if we just allow ourselves to stay focused in God and not my own stuff. Because it's really not about me, is it? It's about what God wants to do with us. And God says, you are more than loved, more than worthy, more than capable of doing great things with your life. And so we have to celebrate that on Easter. So Lent, to begin with, is a very humbling season. It has to take a very honest approach to doing some self-reflection, right? Do some self-evaluation, to look at the things that we do that we ought not to be doing, or that we've done not knowingly or unintentionally, but just seems to come out naturally sometimes, doesn't it? And we just have to look at all that stuff. But we're not going to do it alone. We're going to get Isaiah to help us. You know who Isaiah is? Yeah, he was a point guard for Detroit Pistons. Different Isaiah. But anyway, I digress. Isaiah was a prophet about 700 years before Jesus was born. And he had to deal with all sorts of stuff going on with the people. And you know when God calls out a prophet and says, do some great things with these people, it's not going to be fun, right? You heard some of the words that he spoke because he's starting to call out people and what they're doing. And they never do it quietly. You notice that about prophets? It's always loud. It's always crazy. And it gets everybody's attention. In fact, it even gets them murdered. But we're not going to go that route today, okay? I've got things to do today. So what we're going to do is that we're going to let Isaiah kind of help us because he's in charge of trying to get these people who are just kind of running amok and doing things that they want to do and not doing the things that God intended for them to do or things that they promised God that they would do, but they weren't fulfilling that promise. And so you think, okay, what were the people doing that was so bad? What were they doing? Were they like burning down the temple? Huh? Pushing over little people? What were they doing that was so wrong? It really wasn't what you might think. He talks about it in this chapter. It's kind of stuff that we are prone to do as well. They trampled on the Sabbath. They just didn't really see its value with that, right? They pursued self-interest on the Sabbath. It doesn't seem that bad, does it? Start pointing fingers at everybody. Things that were going wrong, instead of taking responsibility, they just kind of start blaming others for everything going wrong. If they just fix that, if you just fix this, you just do this better, then I'd be a better person, right? Then they started doing speaking evil, gossiping about people. I said this a lot of times to people in church. Please talk to me. Just don't talk about me. I'll handle anything you got to say. But let me address it. Let's address it. And that's hard. It's about speaking evil and doing those things that, that we tend to do sometimes. And the other thing they address is the quarreling, the fighting, creating division. All of those things have nothing to do with God. And there's something to do that we tend to do this. We see this a lot in our society. We probably even participate in some of those things and experience it every single day. But the problem is that that's what's supposed to happen outside the world. But when the world starts to come into here, it starts muddying the water of our faith, and we allow it to happen. Or we say, well, that's just the way it's supposed to be. That's just the way it's going to be. You just got to deal with it. Then we got a problem. And here's Isaiah calling them out. He said, we have to put all of our stuff out on the table and call it what it is. If we're going to be able to fix it, we need to address it first, right? And so we're going to deal with all of this with Isaiah because there's a process that Isaiah went through in this 58th chapter that helps people get from what they were doing to where God needed them to be. And we're going to do that in 5 weeks, okay? 5 weeks. So if you go to therapy, this would take you years to do. Okay? Just put your check on the table when you leave. I'll save you some money. Okay? This will be 5 weeks we're going to talk about this, all right? So let's talk about this 5-step process that Isaiah is going to lead the people. The first thing we're doing is what we're going to do today. We are going to remove the what? Yoke. That's not a typo. All right? And that's just naming our junk, getting it out there, acknowledging the things that we do that are not good, that are not love, that are not grace, things that we do, just naming it because we are not representing God fully with our lives. And we just need to get it out there. But once we get it out there, that's one thing. Because the next thing we've got to do is figure out, now what is it that God needs us to do? So here is 1, me, and here is 2, what God desires for our lives to look like. And then we have to challenge ourselves and make those changes within us that will help us understand and grasp what it is that God needs us to do. So we learn all that we can about where God needs us to be because there's a reason for us learning a different way of doing. You know what the reason is? That's the third point. The reason for that is because we have to be a part of God's vision for the world. So church just isn't a place that we come and grab as much as we can, right? So we can feel good about ourselves. The purpose of our being here is that God says to us, I want you to build my kingdom with me. But that makes you got to make some changes in your life if you're going to do that. Because you can't act a fool out here and say that I'm a Christian. Have anybody ever seen that happen? Besides with me? All right? I see your looks in your eyes. I see that. I recognize that. But that's not what we're called to do. God has a vision for the world. And when we put our head up and see with God's eyes and understand where God is leading us and understand what God needs from us, then the fourth part is we're going to be a part of that. We're going to find those things within ourselves, those gifts, those passions, and we're going to take our place within God's mission, within that vision. And we're going to claim something that is our ministry. It might be with other brothers and sisters. It might be something you do on your own. But we have a place within God's mission, within that vision, to make this world a better place. We are changing agents in the world. We're not passive pew sitters, right? Those days are gone. We are actively participating in something wonderful that's taking place in our world that God has said to you, you are amazing. And I have a special place just for you to participate in something as wonderful as building a place that is all about grace. What? Can you really do that? The cynic in us says, not on this side of earth. But God says, my kingdom will come on earth as it is in heaven. I think we prayed that a time or two, right? Now, we think it'd be hunky-dory once we start getting our work done and stuff like that, but the hardest part for me anyway is number 5. How do you stay connected with God? Especially when times are good, right? Especially when other opportunities come up that kind of look kind of cool. I can still maintain this relationship with God, but still do the things that I want to do. And that's the hard part, is how do you stay connected and keep concentrating on our effort to do the things that God needs us to do? So we're going to kind of work on these 5 things this week. And so today we're going to work on removing that yoke. Yoke isn't a common word, is it? It's a farming tool used back in the day. I mean, way back in the day. Back when you had an ox. Anybody have an ox? No? Okay. So this is what a yoke looks like. And you've seen these in museums, right? Or somebody's house that says, I had all these old farming instruments and stuff like that. That's a yoke. A yoke is used, obviously, to manipulate, to steer, to guide, or to control an ox, right? So you're going to get the ox to do whatever you want to do. And that is what this whole contraption is about. So the yoke is tied to your purpose. Whatever you are yoked to controls you. Whatever controls you owns you. Okay? And so here we have this whole analogy that's being made before us, not only just with Isaiah, but through other people as well, that you can only be yoked to one thing. That's it. Because as Jesus would later say, you cannot serve two masters. Why? You'll always love one and despise the other. Right? They learned that rule in Utah, I think. But you didn't hear that here. Okay? So you can't serve two things. You're yoked to something. You are yoked to something. And so our responsibility is to figure out what it is that we're really, really yoked to. You got me? So we're going to do an exercise. If you're taking your medicine, be careful, you're going to snore. All right? But I want you to we're going to do an exercise, we're going to do this kind of meditative thing. So you're going to get comfortable. Everybody comfortable? Yeah? All right. I have an eraser. All right? Get comfortable. I'm going to tell you, if you want to close your eyes, close your eyes. If you want to just stare or keep them open, stare on the carpet or something that doesn't move, that you can just kind of focus on. So once you take a deep breath, you got to open up your spine. And when you let it out, you just let your body go with it. Get everything in there to relax. Okay? So relax. And then once you get into this state, I want you to kind of, we're rushing through this, just pay attention to my voice, okay? I want you to make a mental list of all of those things that control or manipulate your life. You're not going to write them down. It's all in your brain so you can be just as honest as you can. No one is going to read that list. Just get it out there. What controls or manipulates your life? Your spouse, your work, school, kids, this drive or love for money, to close a deal. Is it alcohol, drugs, friends, sex, social media, need for acceptance, need to be in control? Is it God? Your recreation? So just take a little moment to make this mental list of all those things in your life that seem to control what you do and when you do it. So let's dig deeper. I want you to circle one thing in your mental list that gets more attention than the other, that really does dictate your schedule, that uses most of your resources or money, that controls you the most, that will cause you to drop everything and tend to that. What is that one thing? How does that one thing affect your life? More importantly, how does that one thing affect the lives of those that you love the most? Does that one thing draw you closer or further from God? Does that one thing assist God in making life better for others, to serve those who Jesus came to serve? How does that one thing add to building God's kingdom? Does that one thing make you the person that God desires you to be? That one thing just might be your yoke. Does it prevent you or lead you to trample on the Sabbath, or pursuing self-interest on the Sabbath, or pointing fingers that cause you to lay blame on others, or to speak evil or gossip about people? Does that one thing cause quarreling and fighting, to participate in division? Does your yoke make you the person that God desires you to be? Now I want you to listen. To what Jesus has to tell you. Come to me. All of you that are weary and carry heavy burdens, I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me. I am gentle. I am humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. What does the yoke that Jesus offered look like to you? What feelings come up in your gut when you think about taking on Jesus' yoke? Does it make you happy to free yourself of the burden of living a different life? Does it make you sad that you have to give up something you think might be more fun? Does it make you angry that you might have to choose God means that everything else in your life is going to have to suffer? Does it make you scared of just letting go of something that's always been a part of your life, even if it's not healthy? Or does it make you confused of how Jesus' way of life just might make you happy, and you find it hard to trust it, especially with all of the poor examples of Christians that we see in our world? What feelings form in your gut when you think of being yoked to Jesus' way of life? And what if Jesus promised you that his yoke will help you understand God's plan for your life? And that all the other relationships around you that make up your life, those relationships would become healthier, stronger, more meaningful than ever before. And some of those things that control you today will begin to loosen their grip. And you will be free to be the person that God created you to be. And you will live a life of gratefulness. You can open your eyes if you're still with us. I think the season of Lent for anything, it just comes to the realization that if we're really going to claim what it is that Christ has to offer, there are some things that we're just going to have to let go. We're going to have to evolve as people. Evolution is a great thing with our faith. That we're just going to have to let go of things that we find to be important. We just can't live a double life. One that we do on Sundays and one we do the rest of our lives. We have to be that one person that God calls us to be. And when we choose to do that and work to get that to that place, then we become a people that is very attractive to others who are seeking what it is that God has to offer. So this time what we're dealing with is dealing with those yokes that keep us from being the people that God needs us to be. And so in a little while we're going to take those and present those to God and let God have them. And then next week, we're going to work on the other list of those cool things that God needs us to be and we can be, even though we think that we can't. So let's pray. God of wisdom, we give you thanks for all of life that you present to us. You have created us in your image, which simply means that everything that you command us to do, that we have the ability and the power to do. That we can do the very things that your Son has done, but even do them greater, as he tells us. But first, we have to get rid of those things that we think that we are in order to be the person that you say we can become. And so we meet here at this season of Lent to address those things that we desire to let go, to learn how to trust what you have to offer us, that we can build and be builders of this beautiful kingdom that you call us to live with one another. Inspire us, we pray, to be the people that you call us to be.